that your black is beautiful.
Okay, you should have
Your
sound
black
now.
is beautiful. And if there's anything better than being beautiful, it's being smart. If there's anything better than being smart, it's being kind. And reaffirming that every day is our method of making sure her chin never drops. My dad wasn't around.
30
On,
You did.
it continues to mute.
I didn't teach you.
So I'm going to have
I
to
just created an environment
ride
where they
that
taught
throughout the
themselves.
show.
Would you like me to add another minute?
Would you please? Thank you, hon. Appreciate it.
Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Okay, got it. And I'm going to have to continue to ride the...
Your audio sounds good.
Okay, yeah. It keeps muting.
Women who have joined in the war
That's the
effort.
problem.
They now make up
I've got
37% of the workforce, changing
Okay.
their role forever. The prestigious Harvard Medical School is
Okay,
breaking
all right.
ground today,
Let's have a great
opening
show.
its doors to new fields.
Yes, let's have an awesome show.
Today, little girls all over the world look to the sky, where the first
Sandy
woman
Hicks from
is now in
Detroit.
space.
I love it.
Military stereotypes are challenged today with the
How'd you
trailblazing
connect with us?
promotion
I'm
of a
glad you
US
did,
female
Sandy. I
officer
love
to four-star
Detroit.
general.
Oh, my word.
It was just announced.
We have 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you
Majority
so
of
much.
last year's
Thank
doctorate
you.
degrees
Thank you for
were
being so
earned
helpful.
by women.
Yes, you're very welcome.
May come so far, but our news is changing for the worse. More women die from heart disease and stroke than men, even though it can be prevented. Make a change at goredforwomen.org today.
Okay,
Brought to you
everybody,
by
10
like and
seconds.
share.
the
Like
American
and
Heart
share the show,
Association's
okay?
Go Red for Women.
Robert and Andre and
Stand by.
WCPT
820, because facts matter.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Thursday, August 17th, 2023. I'm coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to meet my morning stars. I want you to get on over to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, and meet everybody there. We got a lot to talk about today. March 4th, and the latest on the Georgia election case with respect to Donald Trump and 18 others. What is going to happen there? Got to talk about that. But we're also going to be talking about this raid on a small Kansas newspaper. It sent a chill throughout the whole world of journalism in the United States because it's not supposed to happen here. Journalists and journalism is the only professional class that is protected in our Constitution. And this paper was raided. And the editors and the editor and owner's home was raided at the same time. And guess what? The co-owner of the paper, 98-year-old mother of the editor, she said, you know, this is going to be the death of me. She was absolutely frightened to have the police and these top investigators from the state come in on her. And she died the next day. Wow. Ooh, and then of course we've got Dr. Max Wolf talking to us about inflation and the economy. And I know he's going to weigh in on what's been happening this past week. Wow, this is the week that has been. And so, you know, two of our giants in the record industry passed away this week. Jerry Moss, a co-founder along with the great Herb Alpert of A&M Records. They gave us Janet Jackson, for example, and the Carpenters and so many great artists. He made his transition, as did Clarence Avant. Many of you have seen the Netflix documentary, The Black Godfather of the record industry. None get through the record industry except by Clarence Avant. Indeed, a great sage, a great advisor, a great record man. Gave us a folk singer by the name of, what was his name? Bill Withers. Yeah, made his transition at the beginning of the week as well. We got a lot. But we are grateful for the work that they've been able to do and sending everybody so much love today. Going to get some of these headlines as we get on with the show. Donald Trump could face trial in Georgia on March 4th, the day before Super Tuesday. Wow. Fulton County District Attorney Bonnie Willis proposed the date yesterday. The final date will have to avoid a clash with Trump's 3 other criminal cases. A federal court said it would restrict access to a key abortion medication because the federal government did not follow proper procedures when it loosened restrictions on the widely used drug mifepristone in 2016, according to the court. The toxic aftermath of the Maui fires could last for years, everybody. More than 1,000 people have risen. The death toll is well north of 100, but now more than 1,000 people are missing. Oh, my goodness. And last week's wildfires, according to this Washington Post report, sent toxic fumes and materials spewing throughout Lahaina and into the sea. The next big storm will flush more contamination into local waters. Cancer among Americans, younger Americans, is on the rise. Indeed, some people are calling it turbo cancer because you find out that you have it and it just runs through the body and then you make your transition. Early onset cancer diagnoses rose by nearly 1% between 2010 and 2019, a new study found. In the 30 to 39 age group, cases increased by about 19%. And according to this data, there's no clear explanation. Wow, a new strain of E. coli is behind recent outbreaks traced to lettuce. Wash your lettuce, everybody. A pig kidney has continued to function in a human body for 32 days, everybody. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 77 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 75 degrees and clear. Well, we now know who are going to be in the finals. It will be England versus Spain. England was triumphant over Australia yesterday, 3-1. The championship game is on Sunday. And in Major League Baseball, well, our crosstown series has concluded. The Cubs 4, the White Sox 3. Wow, and the Tigers were triumphant over the Twins, but just by a run, 8-7, everybody. In the WNBA, the Lynx and the Sky have the day off, but only until tomorrow. The Lynx will be playing with Storm tomorrow, and the Sky will be facing off against the Dream. Pastor Darius Brooks, it's always a joy to be with you, and I know you've got some good news for us today. First good news you've got is that you will continue to give away food, bags of groceries every week. How can we worship with you? And how can we, and I think that giving out those groceries is a form of worship too. How can we get these groceries and how can we worship with you throughout the week?
You already know. You said something with a mouthful right there with groceries. Santita, our worship is a lifestyle. It's not church. It's not singing. It's not teaching. It's not preaching. It's not what the church has and is sharing with us. Worship is a lifestyle, and it's what we give back to God because He's given us everything. And so Great Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois, every Tuesday from 5 till 7. Yesterday was an amazing day. Tuesday was an amazing day. And then Wednesdays at noon till 2. We do seniors from noon till 2 at Great Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois. You can Facebook Darius Brooks or GreatCentralChurch.net. Both of our days this week were full again with people, and we are excited about what God is doing. If you ever want to represent God, serve bigger than self. Enjoy everything God has given you. Your mansion, your aircraft, your millions. Do it, whatever you need to do. But if you ever want to represent God, serve bigger than self. Serve bigger than self. Santita, I'm excited about the good news. You called it the good news because I share with Great Central often, and I got to hurry up because I'm so excited this morning. When you study God's word as a believer, it is so much information in there that you got to go back and say, wait a minute, I've never read that. I never saw that. Santita, it is so much amazing information in the word of God that we only read or try God in the areas that we need Him. We're not supposed to study God's word for problems or success. We're supposed to study God's word for direction. God shows us good stuff, watch this, as well as not so good things as an individual believer, so He can always direct us. Santita, I want to shortly, as quick as possible, because I'm so excited, go to Romans 4 and 5. But you got to study God's word because this is crazy amazing. Now to him who works, the wages are not counted as grace, but as a debt. Santita, track with me, girl. But to him who does not work, but believes on him who justifies the ungodly, comma, his faith is counted as righteousness. Santita, I want to explain this, but I'm going to go on in the message because it's so crazy. And if I had to use for a topic, I used to think like this. Santita, often we assume that our expressions of our devotion to God is small. We minimize just doing, and sometimes we even think it's insignificant. But
Dr. Knighton is on.
And in God's eyes, they hold so much more value and meaning. And the more you dedicate and decide and trust God, it creates a future for you more than you can ever think or imagine, and even for generations to come. We the Tommies went on a tour in Texas, and some of our Grace Central staff members went with us. And one of them came back and said, Pastor, I see what you mean. Although we're a small church, the way we're operating as a small church and the team we have together, feeding all these people 2 days a week, helping people coming by rent and light. He says, in God's excellence, he says, we're not really a big church, but now I see what you mean. And came back and took charge over his little part in ministry in a big way. In 2023, today, he was in charge in an excellent way. He told me, Pastor, I get it. This guy's like 27 years old. I don't know who I'm talking to, but we got to stop thinking and focusing on the world and pay attention to the small things God gives us to pour into people right now. There are still young people looking for Jesus, Santita. There are old souls around him because the big industry don't get it. They're just trying to throw things down their throats like they like this, they like this. No, they don't. God is creating a whole new generation that if you and me can find little mentees to pour into, that's how God gonna do this thing. Don't match God's promises in your position with others. Match his promise with your position, with your faith in him. With God, it's so much bigger than what you will ever think or imagine, and take what appears to be little to you and literally blow your mind to a whole new level. God can take your faithfulness to create something you cannot even imagine in times like today, and create it in a divine way, in a legacy, make it an amazing blessing to even your children's children. And you will never know until eternity. Santita, some things we will never know until eternity. All who have been received by us and a blessing because we were faithful with the little things, because of your righteousness and godly faithfulness, life in Christ. This is why it is so important that you daily express your covenant to God, get into his word, and don't see what God is doing, but pay close attention to what he's sharing with you to do. Because we all are created differently, Santita, but we cannot be no one that God has not created us to be. We can only be ourselves. And if we're trying to mimic someone else, failure is around the corner. God doesn't want you to work your wages. He wants you to work the gift he's given you, which is your faith in him, which is his word for your life. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. Righteousness in translation means mature you, and all these other things will be added. And Peter, if I used a thought, I used to think like that.
Pastor Darius Brooks, everybody. I love you, love you, love you. What is the address of your church? Because we want people to be there, and we want you to support this ministry as it supports you. The address.
Grace Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois, from Sunday from 10:30 till noon. And on Tuesdays, we're on YouTube and Grace Central at 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Yes. Hey, Dr. Knighton.
Good morning. How are you?
I am great.
We love Darius. We love Pastor Darius Brooks, and we love this man and Pastor Brooks. As we pivot to Dr. Knighton, I want to send Carolyn love. Didn't really get rough. I didn't get a chance to send her love, and I want all the morning stars to surround her with prayers. She lost a family member, and she needs our love and prayers this morning. Sending you so much love, Carolyn Ruff. Please blow her a kiss. Send her some prayers. Dr. Knighton and Pastor Brooks, our beloved Carolyn Ruff, one of our morning stars, sending you so much love. Give her some love, everybody, today. Dr. Knighton, what is on your mind today we're still looking at, if you don't mind, because you were very concerned about and you are very concerned about what's happening in Maui. As reporters go in, they said it's a strange smell because only 38% of the fire, only 38% of the search party has been not. More people, fewer people and things have been found than have been found. And the fire is not 100% contained. Lahaina is one of the hottest places on Earth, and so people have seen kindlings as they've approached a home or what used to be a home, and they use bottled water to try and put it out because they see when they turn their backs, they see their flames. But they said it's a strange smell, and I'm getting from the fire chief and the police chief that it's human remains and chemicals and. How do you protect yourself when you have all that in the air? And they said that now they're worried about the water being polluted. Ugh.
Oh no, and I'll tell you this: I don't have an answer for that, Santita. Like that's crazy.
You know what you do have? You did make us think about it, because that's the last thing we're thinking about when you have this kind of tragedy, Pastor Brooks, Dr. Knighton, is infection prevention. You think you can just walk into a place that's burning and okay, no, you can't do that.
Well, Santita, if I had to just interject here, this answers to everything when it comes to God's word when you rightly divide it. That's a natural answer that the Dr. Knighton said. It's a very natural answer. In the natural, we cannot see a spiritual perspective. God tells us that all the time. And they that worship me must worship me in spirit and in truth. The truth of the matter is these really are not a criticism, just an observation. It's not to hurt us. It's to inform us. These are the last days. And he says in the last days, perilous times is going to come. And whenever, God gets to the place where he can't trust us to trust him with our hands, he has to do what he has to do that our hands cannot hold or handle. And so that's a God situation, not a criticism, just an observation. And again, God's word is not to hurt us.
Sure. Well,
so I would have to.
Because I know we're up against a hard break in about four minutes. But you're absolutely right.
Okay,
that having been said, what I appreciate is that you're humble enough to say, "I don't know," which makes me trust the information you give me even more. Dr. Knighton.
Well, thank you for that. And the thing is, Santita, like in this particular instance, it's challenging, right? Because you got people whose homes are on fire where sheltering is not even an option, right? So typically you would tell somebody like shelter in clean air, make sure you got, filter air in your home, like limit spending time outdoors, wearing a N95, a NIOSH approved N95 or a P respirator. But we're talking about all of these things that potentially these individuals may not have because, based off of media and everyone else, this is something that was completely unexpected. So even when I talk about what it is that they should be doing, it's in such a unfair manner because it's not accounting for equity right now and the fact that they may not have access to these resources. So to say spend limited time outdoors when everything is on fire, it's like, how is that really applicable right now? So it's hard to think about infection prevention and control when you're in survival mode, when all you're just trying to do is live.
Amen to that. And so I'm just hoping that is a consideration, that prevention infection. I don't see people with masks. I would assume.
Yeah, masks will help them. Masks will help during this time. Absolutely.
And that's why I'm saying, we need to sound the alarm, if you will, on those issues, because you're right. When people are in survival mode, you're not thinking about these things, but what Dr. Knighton is telling us about. Hey, Dr. Nina, HEYDRNINA, that's her handle on social media. This is not a luxury that she's sharing with us, everybody. Pastor, this is not a luxury. This is This is survival mode. When you've got all these toxins in the air, when you have got people who've been burned beyond recognition, they've been incinerated, everybody. I mean, they didn't even sound the alarms because they said, if we sound the alarms, the alarms are generally for tsunamis and people might run up the hills. Why didn't somebody say something? You mean to tell me you don't have some redundancies in your system so that you can get a voice over a PA system to say, move to the road, fire coming. Tell me something. There are more than 1,000 people missing. And these are not the wealthy people in Maui. Their homes were not touched. These are the working class people. These are the indigenous people. This was the first capital of the Hawaiian kingdom before we colonized it. And that's what we've done.
Wow.
And there were sacred sites in Lahaina. These people were fighting to hold on to their land as conglomerates and wealthy people have been trying to take the land from them. And now they might have an opportunity. Think about that. More than 1,000 people are missing. They need to be talking about infection prevention for those who've been left behind. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in a minute. Why was this small Kansas newspaper raided by the police? And it frightened, and not just the paper, but the editor's home was raided at the same time. His 98-year-old mother was there. She was frightened to death, and guess what? She died the next day. Let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Thank you, Dr. Knighton, and thank you, Darius, for staying around. She does give you a lot of great information, does she not?
Oh my goodness, I love her. Absolutely. But I love her honesty too. Santita, we can get a lot of answers if we're honest. Some things are not in the natural we can explain unless you're in the Word. It's so true. And I like her answer. She says, that's something I don't know. Because there's some things that are spiritual perspective that God gives to divine gifted people. Your dad, you. And really, many are called, few are chosen. Those I chose, I qualify, justify, and sanctify. It's right there in the Word. But for guidance and direction, not to judge or to be, crazy, but to say, right there you go, right there. But your answer is right there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is just,
yeah.
But just the fact that she said, I don't know. And the thing is, a lot of people don't know a lot, but you got to say something. It's like, come on, y'all. This is.
Yeah. And when I don't know, Santita, it blessed me and it blessed you, I could tell, because can you imagine the people that don't know and trying to give wrong answers?
And that's it right there. And that's you're absolutely right about that. And that's one of the things that I refuse to do. And as you know, we all in the era of misinformation, and people threw darts and made up things because they thought that things were great things to remedy COVID and so many others. And so I always say this. I say I serve a God that sits high and looks low, is all around, and feels all things, okay? And so anything that comes out of my mouth, it's not about, ego. It's about that understanding that there is somebody that I have to answer to. And so it's always making sure that when I'm telling people information or I'm providing anything, it's scientifically based. It is something that's based off of knowledge, but also recognizing as well, me giving advice that's not applicable. Because again, somebody is in survival mode is important. But if I could,
Mr. McKee's on.
Where yes, mask would be important. You mentioned people having burns. People that experience burns are at a higher risk for infections. But it's crazy because those conditions that they're in, I cannot imagine being in those conditions, but I empathize with them because I know right now when you are trying to survive, you're not caring about the unintended consequences that happens with survival.
No, they're not.
And so it's so, Santita, it's so true because this week I've been dealing with the West Side. You remember the flood came on the West Side?
Oh, yeah.
It is people in my church. There's people in my church right now that we give them to. It's a couple of Caucasian people that works in River Forest, which is a rich community that lives like on the border of Austin. And they working in the store. I'm going into the store looking at this store. Santita and Dr. Knighton, when I tell you 3 Caucasian women are dealing with this thing, not just in Maui, but on the west side of Chicago, she walked up to me and I was talking to the owner about what we do every week. And she said, Pastor Brooks, may I come to your church? I said, excuse me. She was the cashier of the store.
No answer from Mr. Norakis. I'll continue to call him.
It's not church. The basement is crazy. And I said, me. So it ain't just my way. It's the ignorance of people giving information that they don't even know what they're talking about.
Absolutely.
It's crazy out here. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Dwight McKee, how you doing?
Fine, y'all. How y'all doing?
Okay, Dwight, and of course we've got Dr. Knighton.
30
and
seconds.
Okay, thank you. And we've got Pastor Darius Brooks. We're going to
How
talk.
you doing?
How you doing, Darren? And Sister Knighton, how are you all?
Pretty good.
Mhm.
10 seconds.
Yes, I just want you to know my mind is made up.
You play too much.
I just want
Stand by.
my mind is
Stand by,
made up.
everybody. Quiet,
No turning
please.
back.
Hold on. Quiet, please.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children we can. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey, everybody. Call me at 773-763-9278. 773-763. 9278 763 9278 773 763 WCPT. Let's talk about what happened at this little paper, the Marion County Record in Kansas. Can you imagine? They were raided by the police. The editor and publisher, his office and his home, raided by the police. His 98-year-old mother, co-owner of the paper, she was at home. She said, "This will be the death of me." It frightened her to death. Can you imagine being raided by the police? And guess what, everybody? She died the next day. That's what Eugene Meyer, he said of his mother. He said she was very upset, yelling about Gestapo tactics. And where are all the good people? He told Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. And he said that she was beside herself. She wouldn't eat. She couldn't sleep, and finally went to bed about sunrise. And she died the next day. What happened? What happened? Why were they raided by? Why were the paper's offices raided? Why were cell phones taken? Why were files taken? What happened? What happened? The police chief harbored, according to this publisher, harbored an animosity toward the paper ever since it started asking uncomfortable questions about his hiring. And then other powerful people in the town said, had problems with this little paper. And if you notice more and more, I mean, the Chicago Sun-Times is not the paper that I knew. Neither is the Tribune. They're much thinner. They're not as dense with reporting, and that's happening all over the country. If you go to New York City, that's really an international paper. So you've got the Daily News, you've got the Post. Those papers are getting thinner. They're becoming gazettes. But what happened here? And indeed, we have got to have a free press. We have got to be able to speak truth to power. If you cannot do that, the republic collapses. The founding fathers knew that. Remember, Benjamin Franklin was a printer, and he was also a member of the press. And that is the only class, the only professional class that is protected in our Constitution, the press. We need to have a free press. What happened here, and why is it so concerning to people that this little paper in the middle of Kansas was raided? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Let's talk about it. Dwight McKee, how are you?
Pretty fair. Mine's made up. No turning back.
Oh, my goodness.
Right.
Now, you
Yes,
are
I'm happy.
sounding.
I'm on the right track.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm on the right track.
Oh, that's what you sounded just like Darius. I love it. I love it. Well, you said you'd been following this story. Why have you been following this story? What was noteworthy about it to you?
This Santita was one of the most dangerous precedents I've seen in a long time. It was vigilantism at its purest.
Mr. Norakis is on.
And for the sheriff himself to be offended by what a paper writes and take it upon himself to read the paper without having any supervision from the courts, without having any warrant, just his own attitude and contempt for a paper would lead him and his little army of vigilantes to go in and begin to take computers and paper and notes out of a free press is the closest to Nazism and to Russia and to third world dictatorships that I've ever seen. And these people should be arrested and made examples of, because it is a total violation of the constitutional rights, not just of the persons themselves, but of the institution of a free press. And that precedent, if it is set, it will create a danger. It will be the legitimate end of democracy, because the basis of democracy is a free press, is free expression.
You've got to have a free press. Dwight, you've got to have a
the
free press.
The Constitution starts with that. It is the foundation of the Constitution.
The founding fathers knew that. They knew that. Benjamin Franklin was a publisher. He knew that. He knew he needed to be able to say what he needed to say. And I mean, Jim Narakis, of course, you're the editor of Extra. You know, I told you, fairness and accuracy in reporting because you really do hold the press, the media, if you will, to account for what they do report, what they don't report, what they underreport, what they distort. What happened here in Texas? What happened at this little newspaper? I mean, and then you see that the publisher's mother, the co-owner of the paper, she died the next day. She was so traumatized. What happened? I mean, that is so awful. This was a 98-year-old who was she was by all appearances in excellent health.
Yeah.
And now she's gone.
No, they literally drove her to her grave, and it's really a shame and sickening. What seems to have happened is that a small town paper in Kansas rankled the new police chief by asking questions about how he was hired and whether he was properly vetted before he was hired. And he took it upon himself to retaliate against that paper by using their computers, using their cell phones, their reporting materials, really trying to shut down the paper. He did have a search warrant based on some sort of imaginary charge of identity theft. But there's a separate story about a restaurant owner in town who was politically connected and had a drunk driving record that made her ineligible to have a liquor license that she had. And she apparently, was the kind of excuse for the police chief to come down on this paper. But it really does seem just like retaliation. It's a person who is used to having their authority unquestioned, and here is a newspaper questioning his authority, and so he tried to smush them out. I do appreciate that there's a real groundswell of outrage coming from colleagues in the press, which doesn't always happen in these cases. You don't always. There are reporters for little outlets across the country who get arrested for doing journalism, and it doesn't always become a cause celeb among other more powerful newspapers. But I think in this case, this really was just too blatant, too disgusting. And I think there's going to be some repercussions for this.
Call me at 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. What do you think about this? I mean, Jim, what is, I think that's why we need to be concerned when these kinds of things happen by degrees. Maybe not a raid, but the way a story is distorted, the way it's not reported, what's ignored. As we're watching these large cities, their newspapers are being collapsed. In a revolution, what's seized first is the communication system. How do we find out anything? Save for television, radio particularly, and the newspapers. And I'm wondering what led up to that. I mean, was there any sense that this was going to happen to Mr. Meyer and his newspaper?
Well, I think in this case, it really came as a surprise. This is a paper that's been around for 150 years. It's not a fly-by-night operation. And they've never had anything like this happen to them. The police chief is new in town, and that's kind of what sparked it. Is he was kicked off the Kansas City police force apparently for sexual harassment. And after he was hired very quickly by this little town, people started calling the newspaper and saying, you really need to look into this guy's background, which they were doing. They hadn't written anything because they weren't able to get anyone to go on the record about what this guy had been up to. But the questions were out there, and that was one of the things that they were concerned about, was that the identities of the people who had contacted them were on those computers that were seized, and that is a big concern. That really this was a fishing expedition to find out who it was who had been talking about the police chief and talking about the skeletons in his closet. And that's it's obviously very a dangerous thing for government officials to be using the power of the state to find out who is criticizing them.
Is anyone answering?
And I think that, and Santita, I think he should be the police chief should be charged with second-degree murder. I think because it's a cause and effect relationship. If you were a getaway man driving a car and doing a bank robbery, and somebody, the teller in the bank, got shot, even if you were only driving the car, you become complicitous in the murder, and you get charged with murder. This guy is a direct cause of this poor lady dying because of his reckless behavior and his total disregard for the law. And I think that, and the poor lady died, and I think he should be charged with murder because she died as a direct cause of his actions, whether it was intentional or unintentional. She still died, and he needs to pay that price.
Well, and he did direct. I mean, there is a direct link between her death. She said, "This will be the death of me, Jim Narakis." I agree with you, Dwight McKay.
Yeah.
That was going to be my question. I mean, is there some discussion, particularly in the world of journalism? I mean, look, OJ was acquitted criminally. We're still calling him guilty. Now, my goodness, can anyone not see the link between what happened to this woman and the raid the day before? Can you imagine? That would make your heart stop if you're sitting in your home and then suddenly, because the police don't just knock and say, "Hello, may I come in?" It was a traumatizing event, Jim.
Yeah, they raided her house as well as the office.
Yeah, at the same time.
Yeah.
But and it sounds like it's federal, because that's how the feds do it. When the feds come after you, They knock on everyone who's going to be indicted. Everyone who's going to be indicted, they knock on your door at the same time, and they do it before dawn.
Yeah, I was going to say I think that there have been some terrible precedents set on the federal and local level where journalism is being treated as a criminal activity, and literally in the case of people revealing government misdeeds, that is being treated as a form of theft. That the government secret is considered legally property, and the journalists are treated as possessors of stolen property, and can be accused of criminal conspiracy for trying to get out information about government crimes, which is really an absurd twisting of the First Amendment to allow people reporting on the government to be treated as criminals. And I think, people like Edward Snowden and Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning, when they are criminalized, their actions of, literally talking about crimes that the government has committed, being treated as though they themselves are the criminals, it really sends a message to law enforcement across the country that if you are upset about some secret getting out that you thought should remain secret, that you should use the tools of law enforcement to punish and silence. And I really think that these prosecutions have gone on for years now, and I really think it sends a terrible message in terms of, do we protect journalism in this country? Do we treat people who are exposing government wrongdoing as criminals? There's just so much temptation on the part of people in power that don't want, in general, to be talked back to. They want people to respect their power and to not reveal the nasty bits of how they got into that power. It really, there's so much of a incentive on their part to silence, to use their powerful tools against people who would talk back to them. But we really need to have a taboo against, raising your hand against the people who are getting the truth out. And I think we've really eroded that over the succession of administrations.
I mean, and it has, if you don't mind, I mean, it has accelerated under so-called progressive and liberal administrations. That's what is chilling. I mean, because no one went after whistleblowers more than the Obama administration did. I mean, I support many things that they did, but I didn't support that. I mean, I didn't like the way Hillary Clinton came in on Assange. I mean, this has been happening by degrees. I guess that's what I meant at the top.
Yeah. And it really, I think Biden should issue a pardon for Assange and the long harassment of his journalistic work. Snowden should be allowed to come back to the United States, a free person. And I think that would send a message that we are not in the business of punishing people for getting the facts about our government out. Edward Snowden revealed had a enormous illegal program to spy on all the telecommunications of people in the United States. And people will admit in government that that wasn't really what we were doing. Was not in accordance with the law, in accordance with the Constitution. And he did reveal that. But still, he should go to jail because he said things that technically he didn't have the right to. He didn't have the authorization to reveal that the government was committing crimes. Well, of course not. That's how the government goes around like issuing you a free pass to talk about crimes that they committed. Yet it's that what could be more important than to allow people to point out when the government is breaking the law? You need to protect that.
Well, what about the death of Mrs. Meyer? Who's going to be held accountable for that?
I know that Eric Meyer, the publisher, the son of the late owner, is he definitely has lawyers on his side who are intent to make sure that this kind of thing does not happen without any accountability. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the real options are. There is such a thing as a wrongful death lawsuit where someone is held liable in a criminal court, in a civil court rather, for the death of someone that was done wrongfully. And I think that as a non-lawyer, it seems like you have a pretty good case when trumped up search warrants that doesn't seem to have any real basis behind it is used for just a harassment, punitive raid like this, and someone dies as a pretty clear consequence of that raid. It seems like you would have a good case. Certainly, a jury is going to be sympathetic to a person who lost his mother for no real reason other than the grudge of a local law enforcement official.
Well, I've got about 3 or 4 minutes left in the segment. Dwight McKee is a founding member of Operation Push, and he's with the National Action Network and Rainbow Push, and it comes out of the civil rights movement from the 60s when he was a young teenage activist working with Reverend Jackson and so forth. And he was also one of the persons who went out looking for Bobby Rush after they murdered Fred Hampton, because, of course, J. Edgar Hoover was after them. And, there was an obligation because we knew that they'd been killed by the state, Mark Clark and Fred Hampton. And so they went out, freedom fighters went out looking for them. And then Bobby Rush surrendered from the Operation Breadbasket stage to the police. I've got about a minute for you before you close us out, Jim Narakis. Dwight, do you see, how does your experience in the civil rights movement, how does this impact how you view this particular case?
Yeah, I do know that kind of legal redress would not come to bear unless the public puts real pressure upon the state, because the charges would have to come from the state's attorney or from attorney general, or whoever the supreme law of that county is. And chances are they will protect each other. Historically, that's what they've done. They've protected each other. But what happened in this situation, because it was a free press issue, this little town got support of the press. And they overnight had 2,000 new subscribers that bought into the paper. And the editorials have come from all over the world in their behalf. And so I think there'll be enough public pressure to be able to do both an investigation and some indictments on how egregious this case is.
This is unbelievable. And this is why I think, Jim Narakis, we need to pay attention to Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange, particularly the Assange case, because that is what's before us right now. And what's next for us? What is next?
Yeah, there's another case just a couple months ago in Asheville, North Carolina, where a couple of journalists from a local outlet called the Asheville Blade were arrested for trespassing for covering. The police were kicking homeless people out of a local park, and there were journalists there to cover the police action, and they were arrested for trespassing because they were in the park. And they were convicted, and the conviction was upheld. And there was not the same kind of national outcry about it that is happening possibly in the Marion case. And I just think that you really need to, whenever the press is being attacked, the press as a whole needs to rally around it and call attention to it and put the disinfectant of public attention on these abuses of local authority or federal authority for that matter. It really needs to be a consistent support for the First Amendment, for the right of journalists to do their jobs, because it's a vital job.
Brilliantly put. The disinfectant of public attention. You're the one. You're the one. You're the one. Pay attention to this, everybody. It's because it will be us next. You'll be sitting having breakfast.
Right.
You'll be in bed and somebody's going to raid your home. Just because. Jim DeRakis from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. They need your support. Support them as they support us, everybody. Fair.org. Let's talk about what's happening in the Georgia Trump case. It gets more curiouser and curiouser, Dwight and Jim DeRakis, every single day. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Whew. Jim DeRakis, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Oh, okay. That's a lot of fun.
Well, I just hearing about this woman dying the next day, just my heart just broke.
Yeah.
I said, this is his mama.
It's okay.
What? Oh, I mean, honey, somebody would get sued. I mean, 98. I'm sorry, no one is ever ready to let go of a parent. But just the, the causal relationship. It's so obvious. It's so clear.
Yes.
And it is. And this woman said, there'll be the death of me. She was so agitated she couldn't eat. I mean, she couldn't rest. She didn't go to bed until sunrise.
Yeah.
That's the stress on the heart. And she died.
Yeah.
She died.
We talked to our reporter talked to the editor, and he wrapped up by saying, what are you looking to happen? And he said, I want people to lose their jobs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At the very least. I mean, Dwight, what do you think should happen?
They should go to jail. And like I said, the sheriff will go to jail for murder. I think the policeman should that obeys the order should get both fired and depending on how they
Reverend Urie's on.
sometime if they were intimidating and hostile, I think they should get some time for yes. You want to say something?
I believe one of the reporters had their finger broken.
What?
When their cell phone was taken by the cops, and I think that they actually had a broken finger from the seizure of their cell phone.
And they should get time for that. That's something that they need to be accountable for. I mean, you just can't go and break into somebody's house and declare yourself above the law, take their computers, harass them, be violent with them. And just because they've offended you, I mean, that's as closest to a fascist state as you can get.
Well, we're here, and we've been here for a minute. You know this. But I think we need to recognize that. And I too, Jim, have been pleasantly surprised, to see people all over the media, whether it's corporate or independent media. People have been appalled, and I'm glad about that.
Yeah. No, it's healthy.
Because look, I don't slam anyone in corporate media, and I don't exalt people who are in independent media. The thing is, I like to see people do the right things for the right reasons. But I think this is something as Americans, I think we should be very, very concerned. This is the only protected professional class in our Constitution, and there's a reason for that.
Right.
and we're not protected.
And assault and battery is assault and battery, no matter if you got on a uniform or not. I mean, somehow many of these policemen believe it's because they have a badge and a uniform that they really are above the law. And they have to be made examples of. You have to reel that back in if you're going to have a free, even the pretext of a free society.
Well, I think
you get a sense of
oh, please
you get
go
a
on,
sense
Jen.
of the culture there by the fact that the restaurant owner who sparked this had been having a reception for the local congressman, who is an election denier, a Trump supporter, and it was there that the sort of altercation began when they got kicked out of that reception, the reporters. And so you see that this is a person who has, ties to the local political community. They're connected, and they were able to use those connections, to retaliate against, what has been demonized particularly in Republican politics. Going after reporters, even attacking reporters, is considered like a badge of honor. And this is the consequence of that kind of politics.
It was a badge of honor until it happened to Trump. It was a badge of honor until it happened in Florida. And then it became, a fascist state. And how dare the FBI do that to us? They're out of control, and they're working for Biden. There's a basic inconsistency between those patriots is when it happens to other people as opposed to when it happens to them. And that woman who influenced it all, I think she also should be sued and arrested because she influenced the sheriff to do that. And she needs to be held accountable for it.
It does sound like, there's a lot of the details about that.
1 minute.
But it does sound like there was fabrication going on to justify this voting search warrant, and where the false facts came from is something that needs to be looked into. And it is a crime to make false statements in order to get people arrested. It's not free speech.
30 seconds.
Stand by, everybody. They need to come down on this. Jim, you can weigh in on Trump if you'd like, because we're just for about 20 minutes. We're going to look at this, the latest on this case. You're more than welcome to stay.
Sure.
You're more than welcome to stay right there. Oh, hey, Todd, how are you?
10 seconds.
How are you?
Great. Stand by, everybody. Robert, that part.
Stand by.
Yvonne, call me when you get to Chicago.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Thursday, August 17th, 2023. We've been talking about this case, the Marion County Record newspaper that was raided by the police because the police chief was angered by the reporting that they did on him. And it just goes on and on. The powerful people in the town decided that they needed to take out this newspaper. You need to follow that story, everybody, and follow the Julian Assange story. Follow Chelsea Manning, the whistleblowers, all these people who bring truth to us. They're punished. And the people who do the misdeeds, who commit the misdeeds, the malfeasance, who do the bad things, they get protected. Something is off about that. And that is something that ought to be profoundly offensive to you. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. And I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Meet everybody over there as we talk about the latest in Trump worlds, particularly as it relates to this Georgia case. I want to hear what your thoughts are, everybody. Donald Trump could face trial in Georgia, according to these headlines, on March 4th. That's the day before Super Tuesday. It turns out, as of right now, he will not be at the debate next week. Fulton County District Attorney Fannie Willis proposed the date yesterday. What do you think about that, everybody? Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. Former president's going to be very busy because he's got that case and 3 other criminal cases while he's running for president. A federal court said it would restrict access to a key abortion medication. The federal government did not follow proper procedures when it loosened restrictions on the widely used drug mifepristone in 2016, according to the court. The pill will remain available under existing guidelines while legal battles ensue. The toxic aftermath of the Maui fires could last for years. More than 1,000 people are still missing, everybody. Last week's wildfires sent toxic fumes and materials spewing through Lahaina and into the sea. The next big storm will flush more contamination into local waters. Be mindful of the fact that this is the part of Maui where the working class and the relatively poor people live there. It's an enclave of very, very wealthy people. And this was the last choice oceanfront property that was available. Lahaina was the first capital of the Kingdom of Hawaii before colonialism was imposed upon them, and they moved the capital to Honolulu. Think about that, everybody. And now people swooping down on these people who have lost their homes, and they're offering to buy their property. Can you imagine? You don't have to imagine because it is happening. Cancer among younger people in the United States is rising, particularly in the 30 to 39 age group. Cases have increased by about 19%. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 77 degrees. It will be partly cloudy. It is very cloudy right now. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 75 degrees. It will be clear. Now we know who's going to be in the finals for the Women's World Cup for soccer, everybody. It will be England and Spain. England was triumphant over Australia yesterday. 3-1. Congratulations to them both, and may the best women win. I love saying that. Now, our crosstown series in Major League Baseball, well, it ended, kind of with a split. The Cubs 4, the White Sox 3, and the Tigers were triumphant by just a hair over the Twins, 8-7. In the WNBA, there are some tickets left, everybody. Go on and support these great basketball players. The Lynx and the Sky are off tonight, but tomorrow they're back in there, everybody. The Sky will be playing the Dream, and the Lynx will be playing the Storm. We've been talking about freedom really all show long, and I want you to have your financial freedom. A cornerstone of wealth in the United States is home ownership. Indeed, 15% of the world own 85% of the land. That's what makes America unique. We're probably one of the few industrialized nations that allows people to own their homes and the land underneath. So if you strike oil on your patch of grass, it's yours. That's not the case in more and more places. And indeed, our government is rolling back a lot of those laws. You can own your house, but maybe not the land. Well, guess what? You still need to be a homeowner if you can be. And if you're a first-time home buyer, that is, if you've not owned a home in the past 3 years, you could be eligible for this program. You might have owned a home 4 years ago, 5 years ago, but if you haven't owned a home in the past 3 years, this program may be for you. And I want you to call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID. 855-56-DAVID, or visit them on their website at 56david.com. They're your trusted local lender, and I want you to have the opportunity. Ask them anything about your home. It could be about this program. You might be facing foreclosure. You might have you might have had a cut in your salary. Somebody might have lost a job in the house, and it might become more of a struggle for you to hold on to pay your mortgage. They can answer those questions for you and helpfully set up a plan that could help you help yourself. So everybody, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they want to see home ownership rise in the United States. Just last year, only 26% of first-time home buyers. I mean, they were only 26% of the marketplace. Can you imagine? You don't have to imagine. It's happening. So join Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac in helping you. They have substantially lower rates, and so it's important for you to take advantage of this program at this time because if you don't, if they raise these rates, the program is going to effectively end. So in Chicago, if your total household income, everybody whose name is on the deed, if all of your paychecks add up to $105,700, you could be eligible for this program. So call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, and see if you qualify. But ask them all the questions that you have about home ownership. They can and will help you. And if they don't have the answers immediately, they'll get them to you. And just tell them everything that you're going through, because believe me, for every problem, there is a solution, everybody. This special offer can expire at any time, so I need you to go on and get involved. Call them at 855-56-DAVID or visit them at 56david.com. What is the latest and the greatest in Trump world? Boy, oh boy. Dwight McKee, you're sounding like a prophet. We still have Jim Narakis from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. So glad that he's here. And of course, Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, Esquire, Rainbow Push, pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, Maryland. Wanted to ask you all about what we are looking at, because we're looking at a whole lot. Fonnie Willis wants her trial to begin, or the process to begin March 4th. What will that look like? March 4th is, interestingly enough, the day before Super Tuesday. That's when the South votes. I mean, that's a huge day. Do you think that can happen? What do you think will be the political consequences of that? And what about the fact that now a website published the names and the addresses of those who are on the grand jury? Yeah, it's getting like that, everybody. Dwight McKee, you said this was going to happen. You said, before the 18 people flip on Trump, you're going to see the jury flip. Dwight McKee, your thoughts?
Well, I think
You have a caller.
It is a precursor to things to come. Is that they're going to make it dangerous for a jury, for a sitting jury, to convict this president, this ex-president, in a court of law. And not just based on political persuasion, where some people are just, Republicans or Trump supporters, and that's going to create a difficulty in terms of selecting a jury. But also the jury they do select, at some point, they have to go home to their neighbors who may be Trump supporters, or they have to go to their churches that many in the South are Trump supporters. And it's going to make life extremely uncomfortable for them if they take the wrong position. Now, one can argue that you can get an all-black jury who are liberal, though it's a very hard jury to seat. But the fact of the matter, even many black men in the South are pro-Trump. So you almost reduce to having to try to get an all-woman black jury, all-black woman jury, who is anti-Trump, and it becomes obvious that this is a setup. And so the nuances of this trial get to look deeper and deeper every day. And I think that as the subtlety becomes more expressed, like these names of the jurors getting out, it's going to send a clear message to those who are, just ordinary citizens who don't have bodyguards, who can't live on an island, who don't live in gated communities, that you may not want to be messed with this situation because it's going to affect your life for a long time.
Jim Narakis, how is this? What are your thoughts on this? And how do you think this is being reported? I mean, because, if you look at Fox, you hear one story. If you look at MSNBC, you hear another slant on the story. If you watch CNN, I mean, And if
Right.
ever there was a
They're
time
really,
for truth, we need it right now.
yeah. I mean, I think the release of the names of the grand jurors, the publishing of the names of the grand jurors by a far right website, is a sign of how we are eroding the norms that are designed to have a functioning democracy. You have to have a criminal justice system that is free of intimidation. That is one of the things that you need as a bare minimum to have something that can be compared to a democracy. You need to have elections where the votes are fairly counted and the person who gets the most votes gets to take power. You need to be able to have the press reporting on the people in power without the fear of either legal retribution or assaults. And these things are really being there's a kind of a multi-front attack on the idea of democratic government going on. And I think that of the various indictments against Trump, I think this is the most important one because the idea of people accepting the results of the election as the voice of the people is such a core principle of democracy. And Trump evidently was, had the bright idea that like you don't have to accept that you lost the election. You can just say that you won, and then you can use whatever political strings you have to get people to pretend that you're right. And if that becomes an acceptable practice, then democracy is over. You will never have an election again once you've accepted the idea that the people who lost can say, "Oh no, we actually won," and get people to fake the vote counts and suppress the vote. And I don't have to tell you that democracy has always been more of an aspiration than a reality in this country. That from the beginning of the country, people have been excluded from the franchise. The progress towards really having the people vote has been slow and with 2 steps back for every 3 steps forward. But the prospect of just saying, if he wants to pretend that he won the election, that's his right. That is just too dangerous toward any semblance of the people being in charge of the country. That I think that if the facts point towards this being what Trump really did, then I think it's very important to prosecute him and to punish him for that very direct, very serious assault on democracy.
And what about the republic itself, for which it stands? Reverend Dr. Urey, your thoughts?
Well, good morning, Santita, and to my colleagues. The intrigue continues to build. It will be it will be a scheduling nightmare unlike any other. The big challenge here, well, let's kind of start in the order of the process. The Georgia state law that not only permits but actually requires the disclosure of grand jurors' names should be scary to any of us. On one hand, the grand jury process and its secrecy is sometimes been of concern. But in a case like this, where we've seen verified acts of threat and violence, even against judges, there should be some process by which a judge would have the discretion not to disclose public information. about jurors, like their names, where now you have this whole exercise of doxing, which is basically the process of researching and discovering public information and distributing it widely. It can be a serious problem there. The goal of trying 19 people at the same time is logistically unlikely. Each defendant, unless there's some significant justification to try them together. Most of the time, the argument is efficiency of resources, public resources in particular. The real challenge is how many of these other 18 names actually want to be tried with Trump, even if there is an attempt to remove the case to federal court. That just changes the venue. It widens the pool of potential jurors in the Atlanta division of the federal court, but it's not going to necessarily, I think, change substantively who actually ends up in the jury box. And so I think the next few months will be a lot of just trying to coordinate a dance with a bad DJ, where you're not going to be able to get everybody in step at the same time. Lawyers really trying to keep the court responding to procedural motions. I do think that while the 18 names, Giuliani amongst them, will be of interest along with the fake electors, I don't see a lot of likelihood that they're going to get to the Georgia case before the election. I think there will be a lot of prioritizing of the federal cases just because there's so much implication in the event that Trump could win the 2024 election and then prosecution halts. You may see a test of the pardon power of the president, which has never been tested when pardoning oneself. I think all of this kind of plays out. And so when you look at what's going on in this orbit, this is just kind of act one. You kind of set the plot, but now the actors have to kind of play this out. What will be really interesting is that this recent visit of Giuliani down to appeal to Trump for help with his legal bills will be how long Giuliani is going to be able to stay in the fold. If the pressure with all of his legal risk exposure and actual pending bankruptcy, he's going to go broke because of this. It really remains to be seen how loyal Giuliani may remain and whether or not Trump is going to try to keep him close so that he does not become state's witness. That's the case, the part of the case that I'm particularly interested in to see what happens to him, because I understand that he did not get a warm reception from the former president when he went down with his lawyer to appeal for some support to cover his financial exposure from litigation costs. That could be a perilous decision for the former president. So let's just get your popcorn and your favorite movie drink. I like mine with layered butter because this was going to keep us interested for a long time.
I mean, March 4th, the day before Super Tuesday. Ooh, let me go to Brian from Joliet. Brian, what's on your mind?
Good morning, Santita.
Good morning.
I just wanted to say that there is definitely political censorship in the United States, and the parallels between what's going on in this country and Nazi Germany are frightening. And candidates like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Marianne Williamson, and Dr. Cornel West all, I believe, must be heard and must speak, given the chance to speak more often, because they're the ones who are keeping it most real, in my view. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, as any politician I know of, she's the one who's got it right in relation, the closest to climate change and global warming. And I think if we don't deal with the latter, all the other issues aren't going to matter much longer anyway.
Amen to that. We've got to continue to keep a lookout. I mean, but I don't know what it is. I mean, you know what? I want you all to stay with me just for a few minutes on the other side of the break. I'm bringing Dr. Wolf on. But I want to know why you think, just very quickly, each of you give me about a minute, 90 seconds. Let me know why you think the Georgia case has really captured our attention. It's occupying a lot of space for us. Why do you think that particular case, not the January 6th, not the documents, not Stormy Daniels, this particular case is like the linchpin? Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show right here on WCPT and AM 950 Radio in just a few minutes. I mean, it just seems like this is taking up a lot of space, you guys. I'm not going to hold you, but I would like you to answer that question. You know, I start thinking about space. Are you all still there?
Pardon?
Hello?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. But
Hello?
Is that Dr. Wolf?
This is Brian.
No, I'm about to call him.
Brian, okay. Brian, no, I was going to, Brian, why do you think the Georgia case has captured our attention to this extent?
Oh, the Georgia case?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, if one looks at the huge picture, I mean, I really I don't understand why, if I may, why hasn't Garland brought up charges of sedition against Trump? I mean, directly into it has to do with voting rights and it has to do with
Dr. Wolf is on.
You know, all the particulars. You know, right now I can't give you, but what I said before, and whatever happened again to the George Floyd policing reform bill. Nobody's talking about that anymore.
Or voting rights.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Yes, of course. House. What was it? George L. Lewis. House bills. Forgive me. John L. Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
House bills. Two House bills.
Yes,
that never got through either.
Well,
hello?
Yeah, oh, look, I'm right here with you. We should have had an executive order. We should have had executive orders on those, which last the entirety of the presidency, but I think it would have been a good thing. But wow, now the president is swamped with his own issues. And I just don't know if he has I don't know how much space he's got now, because everybody is beleaguered now. Everybody.
Well, another thing I don't understand is why aren't people peacefully having huge protest marches on these issues? Peaceful ones, I mean, like in the 1960s. I don't understand.
It's not just the 60s. I mean, people have continued to march, but I mean, why do you think that is? Why do you think people are not marching? Hey, Dr. Wolf.
Hello.
Dwight?
Hello?
Dwight,
Yeah.
okay? Just very quickly, as I got
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah. I just didn't want to interrupt anybody. I think that it will, as evidence comes out and information comes out.
1 minute.
I think the intensity will increase. I mean, these trials have just been announced, just started. People are still looking at the implications of it all. And so, as Yuri just said a minute ago, you can get your popcorn out. Is that we just warming up. This is going to get more and more intense as these trials and these circumstances go along. For example, the fact that she announced that she wants to hold
30 seconds
first hearings at the same time that these debates are going on is looking more and more like sabotage, campaign sabotage to the Republicans. And I'm sure there's going to be a backlash to that.
10 seconds away.
I just think this thing is just
10 seconds.
Getting positioned to become a
Stand by.
major. political situation.
Brian, I'm gonna have to let you go, sweetie. But thank you so
Change the world.
Thank you.
Change the world. Change the world. We can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world. I am green.
Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT 820. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763. WCPT. We've been talking with Jim Narakis of Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting and Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, Esquire, Rainbow Push, and pastor of the iconic Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, and noted social scientist Dwight McKee. Before we pivot to Dr. Wolf, and typically we're driven by economics, in these elections, as we are now really moving full on into the 2024 season. But I feel like we're going to be consumed with the Trump trials. Why do you think, Jim Narakis, the Georgia trial, not the January 6th, not Stormy Daniels, not the documents that were found at Mar-a-Lago, why do you think this particular case has captured our attention? It's taken up a lot of space, Jim.
Well, I think it is the getting at the real question, which is, are you allowed to reject the results of an election because they didn't go your way? If the answer is yes, then all hope of democracy is lost. And so enforcing the idea that elections are to be respected and that you can't use skullduggery to try to reverse the will of the people is really critical. And the January 6th was an attempt to impose the plan of the conspiracy that the Georgia indictment is about. You first rig a pretend victory in election, and then you try to enforce it with a mob attack on the Capitol. And so you can see January 6th as a consequence, a sort of sequel to what is being prosecuted in Georgia. The Stormy Daniels is, that was a case where allegedly hush money was being paid to protect Trump's own political fortunes. The classified documents are essentially about, whether a lawful order from the government needs to be obeyed. But they don't strike at the heart of democracy in the way that both the January 6th and the Georgia prosecutions do. And I think especially the Georgia prosecution, by bringing in the whole team, really gets at how there was what the government is calling a conspiracy to overturn an election. And that is what kind of crime is really more serious? That is the crime against the republic. There is no other crime more serious.
Reverend Dr. Urey, why Georgia?
Well, Georgia gives us a full cast. If you look at the other cases, they tend to be what we call one-offs, right? It's Trump's behavior in New York as the leader of the business enterprise, and then it's kind of the family. So we've kind of seen episodes of that movie. The documents cases and Trump's role. You have one or two what we might call underlings who are doing his bidding, but nothing really, all that interesting and sensational. The one-off with Stormy Daniels as an adult movie actress. Well, for some folks, that's just called another night on TV. That's nothing in particular that's intriguing. Just kind of take your remote and run through the channels and you'll find something. This case in Georgia, where you've got named co-conspirators, and some of them are folks that we've heard from every day. Some of them have shown up in other civil suits about the the voting machines, when you have a Sidney Powell and a Rudy Giuliani and a Mark Meadows, and then you have names of fake electors, now you're beginning to get more granular and closer to ground level for regular everyday folks, where now they can kind of see that there are maybe some connections. Everything else has been kind of in the mist and kind of, theatrical. This one is going to get very real. And as we see it play out and see how folks move in response to kind of protecting their own neck, because Trump will not have pardon power for a state-based conviction, and state law in Georgia does not allow the governor to convict until you've served 5 years before a panel can even consider it. There's some real prison exposure for these other 18. And if you just get your popcorn, I get the one where you can get a refill without having to buy another bucket. So I'm gonna have all my popcorn the whole time. You might want to watch the whole movie. Don't show up in the middle of it, because you'll miss the plot. And this thing is just getting started.
And there are plot twists. Dwight McKee, before we pivot to you, Dr. Wolf, and Dr. Wolf, you feel free to weigh in on this as we just Dwight, your thoughts.
And it's also the one on the Republican side that seems more convoluted, that is designed to not allow him to be able to become the president one way or another, either put him in jail before the campaign if he loses, or put him in jail after the campaign if he wins. And so it has the most drama to it. And also because the way she structured it as a RICO, on the Republican side, seemed the most contrived and the most political based. And so it's going to create, I think, the most hostility. And it's become the major talking points on the right that this is a lefty plot to take the president out to keep him from becoming the president. So again, it's going to get very, very, very hostile and very, very interesting. The rest of them, as the Yuri said, are just nuanced trials. This is for all of the marbles.
And it's going to get very personal, everybody. Welcome to your segment, Dr. Max Wolf.
Yeah, so I would say I do have an opinion on this stuff, which will be different from everyone else's, right? They're not necessarily useful, but different, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, I think this is just part and parcel of the political instability that comes in a country with this level of political dysfunction and wealth inequality. And this is the bread and circus. And the people in the Trump cult, and it is a cult, which is why they're focused on him. And that's one thing they've always shared with him, because he's never really been able to zoom out. He's always been focused on him. That sort of would make sense that would wear you down, because that's a pretty heinous thing to be looking at all the time. I get it. But they don't get that he doesn't matter, right? They had their own gladiator who they liked, who said they were wonderful, who won a few, who loses a few. And if you're a gladiator, at the end, your glory is being fed to the lions. That's all you got. That's the game, right? So if you're so far removed from the logic and function of the system that you don't understand it at all, then yeah, your opinion is always going to be wild, and you're always going to be excited because you live vicariously through him in breaking the rules. To me, this is sort of an interesting situation because I think a little of what's on trial here is privilege. Is it okay when a rich white guy does it, an old rich white guy does it? Not because it's okay, because that debate no one wants to have, too dangerous, but just because of who did it. And that's about what kind of America we have. Is what's okay and what's not okay, what's legal and what's illegal, what gets punished and what doesn't get punished, a function of who does it or a function of the law? And we are dangerously close to the edge on that one, right? I think that matters. I think it's very easy to get dragged down into what's happening in the arena today, right? And what's happening is you're getting fleeced the other 29 days of the month, and you're watching a bunch of people savage each other to get your mind off the thing and to feel big and strong. and maybe feel like you have some say in the thumbs up, thumbs down execution decision, right? But what matters is that you're there watching that, not which gladiator wins that day. Now, if you are the gladiator, yeah, okay, sure, I get that. If you're getting the thumbs up and the thumbs down, I can see you being real wed to that decision, which is probably not trivial in the determination of how long and how luxuriant your future might be, right? But I mean, I think the bigger picture here is the distraction and the structure, not the individual plot. And yes, they are salacious here, right? But we've all been dragged through a series of traumas on this fellow, right? With him, I guess, probably the way his life functions. But this is more symptomatic of the decline of the rule of law, the grotesque inequalities of wealth, making it very hard to have a functional democracy. And it answers another weird question that I guess I and friends, I know some of whom, the sort of brighter minds on the show, whom from I always learn, it was always hard to figure this out. How the Republican Party, especially with Trump, betting on the past to trump the future? How do you get on the wrong side of every demographic trend and still get elected? And the answer is you don't. You pick who gets to vote. And that has kind of become clear. In terms of who did what, again, I'm sure my opinion is not the universal, but I don't think there's anything interesting here. I think you have a 75-year-old man who's a serial felon who continued to commit felonies and is surrounded by enablers and felons, like most felons, right? That's why the nasty law that gets people sent back to jail is, hey, felon can't associate with other felons. If they decide to enforce that, it's going to be tricky. I do agree that a lot of fallen, broken, corrupt elites could get caught up in the wash here. And I think the other thing I would think about why Georgia might matter is because Georgia hurts for Republicans because it was theirs, because they were able to determine who voted there more effectively longer, and the state's demographic trend, it's kind of theirs. And they've blamed everything on the press. So all bad news is the fault of the press, and all the sort of changes we don't like as Republicans or conservatives in Washington, that's a Washington, D.C. factor. So I think not being in Washington, D.C. and being in the South, when the Republican has to some extent become a rural and regional party of the South and rural areas, is important, right? And I think people disoriented about that because we look at maps, which is weird. I like maps as much as the next guy, but dirt doesn't vote. People do. And so the map makes it look like everyone's a Republican because the dirt is. The people aren't. So you also have a party here that doesn't win the majority of votes on the national level ever anymore. They don't win most of the votes cast for Congress. They don't win most of the votes cast for Senate. And they don't win most of the votes cast for president. They just still are everywhere. And they have taught us all that what you should look at is where dirt sides on the political map, which is a very odd decision, but whatever. I guess we've all taken that face value. So I also think you have a shrinking minority party protecting entrenched privilege at a moment where the privilege is at its apex and the plurality supporting that privilege is probably at its lowest point. And that is why I think it's dangerous.
But there seems to be privilege on both sides. See, the other side of the equation is there's another way to bring in the masses, and that is to prove that the lions have been drugged, and it was never a fair fight in the first place. And that's where the country is now. Is you got the gladiators on one side saying we are the heroes. We've saved you all from the lions. We've killed the lions. And the other side of the country saying, yeah, because we found out that the lions were drugged. And it was never a fair fight. And it's Trump's argument. And so this thing can go either way. And it is a country that was set up to protect the privilege, which is why they have an electoral college in the first place, is to protect the privilege. And so even though the Democrats have the majority and they win the majority, the Republicans are still playing by the rules because the rules were set up for the privilege. Sure. And so this thing is going to go either way.
Yeah, I mean, that all depends on how you frame it. I don't disagree with you. That's whether you frame the Democrat and Republican Party as the two sides or just one of the two sides against the sort of mass of people on the other side. But that's all how you frame it. So I don't disagree with that.
Jim, you want to chime in?
Well, I mean, I think that you are getting at one of the very difficult parts of analyzing United States politics. In that, in the big picture, it is a highly stratified class society, divided by race and gender, and set up to ensure that the people in power remain in power. And the two-party system is a key part of that structure. It does seem to be breaking down in that the norms that allowed the two parties to serve as a means of peaceful competition between factions of the ruling class, it is breaking down in that one of those factions is no longer content to allow that competition to happen peacefully. And when you realize that you don't have to accept the results of an election, you can say that you won when you lost. It is especially as you say, the demographics are pointing against the Republican Party, and so they have an incredible temptation to say, this democracy thing is really not the thing. We should decide who's in power by who has more power, and that was what was going on in Georgia and in a number of states where Trump was trying to flip the election by arranging for a false vote count to be put forward, so that he could win an election that he lost. And while it's true that the grand history of the United States is a history of people in power arranging to remain in power and people struggling against that, you do have within that, I think, an important choice between whether that ruling class is going to try to remain in power through legal and at least nominally democratic means, or whether we're going to have a dictatorship where the power of the ruling class is expressed through essentially armed might. When you don't have elections, then the way that you decide who's in power is who has the guns and who's able to kill the people who dissent against their rule. It's not a prospect that seems at all appealing to me. It seems like a nightmare course for the United States to go down. And I think that is what we are facing if Trump manages to evade punishment for trying to overturn the 2020 election and manages to, by hook or by crook, win the 2024 election. It's
definitely by crook. Definitely by crook.
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
No risk of hook.
But but
I would say one thing though. To me, when I talk about privilege, and I'm not the best person, maybe the worst person on the call to say this, we're still a country grappling with whether it's okay for a police officer to shoot an unarmed teenager because the kid makes him nervous. But we're also not okay with asking tough questions to people who had a failed coup. You don't always get a glimpse of a disproportionality that fierce, right? Like that is fierce, right? So some kid driving to the store to buy a gallon of milk can get killed for moving suddenly, and we have to have a social debate about whether or not he should have acted different. Now, I'm not saying everyone thinks that's okay, or we got beyond that moment, I guess, but it's still a debate, and everyone's not on the same page. And now we're saying, hey, if you try to cook an election, should you be exposed for that? And there's a lot of people who think that's a bridge too far. And they're probably the same people who want to know how the kid moved and what his T-shirt said and, how loud the radio was, such when you get a 14-year-old kid shot possibly fatally for going to the store to fill up the tank of gas before work tomorrow or get milk or whatever they're doing, which is not material anyway, right? So you sort of see this disproportionality here that seems kind of wild. Like, Georgia's not a state where you expect leniency, is it?
No.
All of our, I don't think that's the reputation. No offense to Georgia, and I'm not a jurisprudential scholar in the history of Georgia, but I don't even think the officials of Georgia would make such a claim.
So, aren't we supposed to be talking about the economy? People out here you have 7 million more people.
Better for me, that's how I make a living.
But you have 7 million more people who are hungry today than were last year. Most folks can't afford an emergency room visit, not to mention the fact that they're closing hospitals, not to mention the fact that we don't have 1 million beds in the United States for 330 million people, conservative estimates. We have some real issues. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that these constitutional issues, that these cases are pushing, and issues of influence and influence peddling that we're seeing on the right and the left. Because quite frankly, I think we need to hear about all this stuff. But the bread and butter issues, they're not even getting close to being discussed, Dr. Wolf. Is that concerning to you?
But there's an overlap too.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you do professional asset management, which is part of how I earned my keep, advising professional asset managers, right? They have the statistic. It's a term probably most of your audience is not familiar with, called MOIC, because we like acronyms, but it's really multiple on invested capital. And it really is just a fancy way of saying, if I give you $1, how much do I get back? And if you could buy politicians directly, you didn't have to buy them around some public scrutiny and democracy, your multiple on invested capital will go much higher, right? So when you hire a guy to drive the bus you own, there really isn't such a messy voting thing. The market votes, if they buy the service and sit on your bus or someone else's, but you don't have all this oversight and these lack of predictability and these elections and the politician who might take $1 million from you and then come back and demand more because the other guy's offering him 1.1, right? And so there is a connection here, right? Also, I think the idea that if I'm very wealthy and my assets command or my income commands domination over other people and all kinds of services, including often the kink that develops of wanting what's not for sale in all the hideous forms that takes, right? The idea that I can't just buy the political outcome I want is enraging to these guys. And they will chafe at that particular bit in the mouth. And it is, in a way, a violation of the market rule that $1, one vote. So democracy stands against that. And then the other thing is democracy is a really expensive social investment, right? You kind of need to have something of a middle class. You need to emancipate and invest in women. You need to emancipate and invest in some upward mobility. You have to have decent schools and public transit and public health. And we see that those are kind of important to sustain any kind of democratic infrastructure because the rule of the people means you have to invest in the people. And 40, 50 years into disinvesting in the people, that's just more difficult to do, even if you still want to.
I've got 1 minute here. What do you want us to know? What do you want us to look for? Because we were, like you said, there's overlap between the economy and all that we're watching with Trump and with Hunter Biden and everybody.
Yeah, look, I think everyone knows the public's really angry about privilege and won't admit it because it's not the American way, but feels the pinch and is sort of has this grinding sense in the back of their head that they're vulnerable and maybe they're not middle class. And then it's a question of how you channel that rage. Because if it goes at the sort of corporate elite or the employers, then you sort of lurch in one direction and you can get political instability on the left side. And if it lurches as anti-immigrant, anti-gay, anti-women, anti-minority, then you have fascist movement. Right now, we're seeing a debate about which way to make sense of the situation. And I guess my annoying point as an annoying economist is let's be less interested in how they're trying to manage our discontent and more interested in having a society that doesn't generate so much discontent and inequality.
Everybody, keep your eyes open, not wide shut. Keep them open. Jim Narakis, I want you to stay with me, Pastor Yuri, and just give some closing thoughts on the other side, right here on the Santita Jackson Show, everybody. I love you. God bless you. And be safe. It looks like it's about to really, really storm out here today. I heard up in Naperville, just outside of Chicago, that it was raining cats and dogs, and I think it has moved into Chicago. Now I cannot even see a quarter mile away. Be safe out there, everybody. God bless you. I love you. The Santita Jackson Show. Wow. Reverend Dr. Yuri, your closing thoughts?
Yeah, real quick, Santita. I think a lot of the analysis, we've got to get back down to the reality of the regular person on the street. The analysis of what's going on with the Trump phenomena is because he has found a way to give voice to a sector of voiceless people who had been disaffected by the process. And because this was the first time that they felt they were heard, they feel like they owe him the loyalty and their own self-interest, actually, to try to give whatever their mythology is, the story that they have framed, because he has actually created an emotional response. Emotional responses very often are counter-rational. They're not going to be based on information and analytics. They're going to be based on belief. Belief is what's driving this. And so in the course of how we analyze this, in the course of how we see this, as we start getting into the debate stages, listen for who's going to be speaking the language of the disaffected. And if it continues to be Trump and everybody else is responding to what they believe is Trump's dysfunction, he not only is going to run away with the nomination, he is going to create the kind of chaotic potential of a general election in 2024 that's going to make all of these cases, I don't care whether you're prosecuting in state or federal court, it's going to make them much more difficult to fathom. The real issue in terms of what may happen in New York, because it's kind of slightly different, that's one thing, the venue may matter. But when we're looking at this, I think we have to remember that January the 6th, as bizarre as it appeared, it is not that far-fetched when you consider that when you have a people who have been ignored so long within a system that was not designed for them, and we know that we the people did not mean we all the people. People is a legal term. Person is a legal term. When folks finally get a sense that they'll feel like their humanity is being acknowledged, they will die on the mountain to protect that sense of inner dignity. And until we get back to making the politics, the political speech relevant to those circumstances, then you're going to continue to see Trump dominate this kind of what some of us might critique as irrational behavior. But politics is not rational behavior when you look at how it's played out in the United States. And so I think we've got to get to, the analysis is good when we think about how this is just really not the kind of structural behavior we would expect. But this ain't a structural reality. When you have a former president facing 4 indictments, there's no analysis we had prior to the 45th president of the United States who would have ever thought that this impossible, much less plausible. Now that we're here, we've got to understand that the reason you have 4 indictments, maybe more to come, I don't know, and no one has kind of said, well, when do we finally stop and say that this ultimately disqualifies someone, is because the one that has been indicted still has captured the imagination of the disaffected, and the disaffected will determine what happens in this next election, not just in terms of who's going to sit in the Oval, but the one that you really got to watch is you've got 34 Senate seats, all 435 House seats, and then state and local elections going on that has made all of this not just a possibility, but a reality. And if the Democratic Party, particularly, does not get to speaking the language of the people, they're going to find themselves standing on the outside, watching whatever chaos they don't want being the day-to-day reality of the country for the foreseeable future.
Jim Narakis, do you have any closing thoughts?
Well, Trump is referred to as a right-wing populist, and people call, I think calling right-wing populism is like calling dog food and rat poison the same kind of thing because they're both intended to be fed to animals. It's right-wing populism is an attempt to divert the anger of the disaffected onto scapegoats and onto conspiracies. It is a ruse by the ruling class to turn anger into a way of shoring up power rather than tearing it down. And that if you look at who's actually voting, the poor people are vote Democratic, wisely or not. Rich people vote Republican. That is still true, despite the pretense that Trump puts on himself of being the voice of the masses. He is the voice of the ruling class in a more direct way than Joe Biden, who certainly speaks for the privileged himself.
Dwight McKee, your closing thoughts?
Well, I think that the analysis I was using when that we were talking about the gladiator games, and I think the dynamic changes once you can convince the masses, that is the crowd that sits up there with Caesar, that the lions were drugged and the gladiators never were the real heroes. What happened historically is the crowd turned on Caesar and put him to death because they felt cheated, and they had bet their money and lost their houses based on a rigged game. And I think we're right in the middle of this. The question is going to be, to me, is who's sitting in Caesar's seat that's going to get turned on. And I think that that we are right on the precipice of that reality. Right on the precipice of that reality. That the whole country is going to begin to turn on each other. And somewhere between the masses and seasoned soldiers, all you're going to have, the bloodbath is not going to be on the field. It's going to be in the stands.
Wow. Your closing thoughts, Dr. Wolf?
Yeah, the stands are always there to be the bloodbaths, right? And what I don't like, just as a sort of person who cares about people, however hokey that might sound, is that the mass of Americans don't seem to show up on any decision maker's radar as anything other than pawns. And that's how you know it's spun pretty far out, right? It's what can I get my people to do versus what you can get your people to do, right? And I think we first began to see this in some of the religious communities upset about ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Because I remember listening to that and thinking, like, this sounds like jealousy. This sounds like a jealous rage that they can push their people a little further than I can push mine. It didn't sound like righteous worry about a cult that doesn't respect life. Because it's hard to say, hey, let's incinerate those people that don't have a deep respect for life. There's always something about that I find hard. Perhaps bad upbringing or European parentage or something. But it always seems kind of off, right? So I also think America's making another decision, and I'm a weird person, so I'm usually more interested in the structures than the people, which makes me odd, but it does mean I sometimes see things a bit differently, right? And that is, are we in love with an imaginary version of our past, or are we willing to accept the challenge of the future? And one of the things that's really interesting to me about the breakdown lines, about how groups break down around Trump and some of the more extreme agendas these days, is no one who I see embracing and building the future seems excited about them. And everyone who I see who doesn't want that future to arrive and can't embrace it is super excited. And so I think reactionary movements always have that dividing line too. And they always live on propaganda. And so I think one way that I see the sort of Trump stuff, and again, Trump is just one of a bunch. He's not that relevant. He thinks he is, and the media thinks he is. But I'm not so sure there's all that much to it. Obviously, if you're in the cult, sure, right? But otherwise, if you're not in the cult, if our movies got more violent and are full of sex and weird sort of paranormal, like outside of the historic norms of what's sexually discussable, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way, more violence, more sex, more deceit, right? Then why wouldn't our politics, which is a grand show for those audience, follow suit? And if it is just following suit, then it's a more deep social question. And it's not about this guy versus that guy. The quirks might be that the morality police are once again the biggest perverts. But I mean, I challenge anyone who likes history to find a single historical example in which that's not true. That part's not even interesting from a sort of social norm. And so I think we're just at this moment here where we're trying to decide, are we going to give up on our future and fall in love with an idealized version of our past? Something that you see humans do when they get near death too, by the way. Or are we going to accept the challenge of the future, work within the limitations, and build a better version of who we actually are now? Or slip into the weird drugged fantasy of returning some glory days, which probably weren't that great. I think that's the question too on the ballot. And I don't think you get a second chance to get that one wrong.
Do you think we know that? Maybe not in that language.
No, I mean, my phrasing was weird probably and could be smoother.
No. It wasn't weird. It wasn't weird, but so many of us, look, PBS is almost like an outlier. Okay. Most of us, when I got to Fox, I was told, make sure that you language things in a way, Santita, that you can go for the person with the 6th grade education. It's not that Fox disrespected people. There's a reason that they're the biggest and the baddest in the game. They know where we are. We don't have these, elevated conversations. And I don't mean in terms of vocabulary. I mean just in terms of ideas. We talk about what my father said, little people talk about other people. Medium-sized people talk about the things that they have and the things and the places they've been. Big people talk about ideas. Increasingly, Americans, we don't talk about ideas. We have entertainers. We don't want artists. We don't want to talk about ideas. And to me, these are big ideas.
Maybe we do. Maybe the people who run the country don't want us talking about ideas. I think sometimes people do.
So I'm hoping so, but I think that when you sit down with people, they stop and they go, you're right. And I'm hoping that we will do that because we have big ideas. We have big issues that are before us. And either what do they say? If you don't have a seat at the table, you are on the menu. So either we're going to consume or be consumed. We have some real issues that we've got to deal with, everybody. And you've got to demand that those who run for office, those who present the news to you, those people, the powers that be, you have to demand that they're accountable to you. Let's not get it twisted, which we do have it twisted, Max. We're for, what did they say, one of Michael Moore's movies, they were visiting some people in France and they said, in America, we're kind of different because, in America, you're afraid of the government. In France, the government is afraid of us. We do have it twisted. We really, really do. And we're not going to get this American project right until we untwist this knot.
Yeah. I think the sadder thing might be that if you want social change in America, there's a good chance you think the way to do that is to stockpile firearms and shoot the receptionist if you're fired at your job. Yeah. And I just don't think that's a great way to affect social change. But it does make it real dangerous to be a receptionist or a teacher. And at least some of our states now are telling the teachers, like, hey, be prepared to be shot. I know the wages aren't good, but be prepared to be shot, which does seem like that embraced the idealized version of the past. It doesn't seem like the future.
And have a gun in the classroom. You're going to need it. What?
But I mean, there is also some hope here. I don't want to paint too bleak a picture. I do think younger people generally don't buy this. I just don't think they buy it. There's some, right? But they don't. And then you look at a society, and I'm sure some people will be offended by what I'm about to say, and I don't mean to be offensive. But the children are the view of the future, and that's cause for concern. But politically, it's also interesting because they don't seem to have fallen for this too much, right? And marginalized voices are always the conscience of a society, of all societies. And that's why those voices tend to be women, people on the edges, right? I'm not trying to say something sexist or racialize anything, right? I'm just saying that the people who are most subject to a system experience its limitations as rape and violence against them. So they're real in tune with it to survive, right? So a conscience of a society is always the marginalized voice. And the future is always the kids, right? And that's not a thing about just today or America, or that's just a sort of social, near universal norm since we had organized sedentary societies, right? So for tens of thousands of years now. So we kind of know that. And if you look at where women are and you look at where young people are, there is cause for some hope.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're more progressive than we are. The world
and marginalized voices. I mean,
that's absolutely.
Yeah, when you see the Black community for Trump, you got 3 paid actors and a guy from India.
No, I think it's a little bigger than that.
It doesn't.
But he's a Rorschach
It's a little,
test,
but
right?
it's weak.
Well, no,
I mean, in New York, I know it's different in different places.
No,
but
because I know Joe Pinion and some other people up in New York. He has a chunk of Black men. Dwight, why don't you speak to that very quickly before we go?
Oh, and it's getting more intense every day because they identify more with him, and he is more symbol of their own personal aspirations than is Joe Biden. The average Black man don't want to be every man. He wants to be, a player. The man. And Trump better represents that. And so they see him as a aspirational personality. And they really do think the Democrats have sold him out on the immigration issue and on the voting rights issue. And there's been no return on their investment because as the rest of the country seems to make some progress, Black men seem to be getting poorer and poorer and more locked up in jail and battle the wrath of the hostility in society. And they don't get the benefits, but they bear the wrath. So he does have a legitimate Black base of maybe 1 out of every 5, soon to be 1 out of every 4 Black men.
It's real, Max. I'm watching it grow constantly.
I'm sure he has some.
No.
But 25% of Black males who don't vote in his high number and very low percentage of Black females still equates to a fairly poor overall performance, right?
They'll vote. They'll vote for him. I mean, I think you're watching a dismantling of this duopoly, also. And so, I mean, and because Latinos have turned away from the Democratic Party in massive numbers. They have.
And comparatively, whether the numbers that have shifted versus the numbers that have remained with the party, they may not look similar. That's not the question. Are you losing sufficient numbers of your base that the outcomes of elections are now impacted? That is where political power comes from. And so Trump has never been trying to win the majority of any group that doesn't typically join with the Republican Party. He's just trying to get enough of them to be able to pad his margins so that in an electoral setup, even if he loses the popular vote, he can still come away with the electoral win. And I think too often we play this game as if the rules were written the way we wish, as opposed to mastering the game according to the rules as they are. And if we don't get back to fighting this as not an election, but 50 statewide elections that lead to one electoral outcome, we're going to continue to find this issue where we're trying to get this singular message of a litmus test that says the way we speak to issues in the Deep South is going to be the same way we speak to issues in the industrial North. There's got to be more nuance and more sophistication to the politics that are presented. Otherwise, you're going to create another opportunity for, if it's not Trump, another like him. What do you see now happening is how folks are trying to get as close to Trump without becoming him, so that they don't become walking personifications of the hypocrisy they're trying to avoid. This comes down to who's speaking the language of the people who vote, not the people in mass, because majority rules that's not the rule of parliamentary procedure. The majority of those who participate rules. And if those who are not participating are counted in this discussion, that's one thing. That's aspirational. But the reality is who's actually going to get in the arena in this process, and whoever is vying for their votes ultimately is going to come down to win. And your caller that was on just before we went off, Santita, talking about those who need to be part of this broader conversation, Dr. Cornel West and Marianne Williamson among them, their voices need to be heard, because I think they're speaking to a wider swath of the disaffected class than we might even know right now.
And Robert Kennedy.
And the Democrats are playing, democratic politics. The Republicans playing geopolitics. And in a country based on the electoral college as opposed to majority rules, geopolitics are much, much, much more effective, which is why they're in control of so many local institutions.
Well, I think we're going to have to continue to look at this and watch it and really become even. I think we're going to have to become even sharp. We're going to have to, our critical thinking is going to have to sharpen. Because I promise you, these questions and more are going to arise, because so much is going to be thrown at us. So much is being thrown at us now. Can you imagine what it's going to be like to watch these trials, watch these legal proceedings during the campaign? And not just for Trump, for Hunter Biden too. Because remember, his plea deal has been thrown out. So all bets are off there. There's a lot that's going on here, everybody. And if you see this awful commercial that the Republicans are running, as you're watching a fragile Hunter Biden, and my heart goes out to him and his family, because I can't even imagine struggling with drug addiction. And I think it's just shameful that they use photos of him when he is clearly in the midst of his addiction, using drugs. For that to be the heart of this commercial, it's a horrible thing. But that's where we're starting. That's a jump off point, everybody. Not the jumping off point. That's the jump off. You just wait and see what's coming down the pike. It's going to get real ugly. I just hope that we'll be responsible enough to stay focused on the issues. Because at the end of the day, Hunter Biden is financially set. So is President Biden. So is Donald Trump. Giuliani, well, not so much right now. That having been said, he has an opportunity to make some more money. But most Americans are not. Most Americans are struggling. Keep that in mind. Don't make everybody else's problems your problems. And just as a side note, I lived in New York for quite a minute. And I remember when Giuliani talked about a march on the Capitol, a raid on the Capitol. I remember when Dave Dinkins, the first Black mayor of New York City, was fresh into his term. He led a racist mob of the FOP, a riot on City Hall, while Dave Dinkins was in there, and they were shouting the N-word and all of it because they carried it live on the news. He did that.
On the bridge, they blocked the bridges and the highway too.
What you say?
They blocked the bridges and the highway too.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a straight riot. Yeah,
it was a straight riot. They broke they broke regularly scheduled programming to show you the riot, and he was leading it. He was leading it, and I will never.
And it came out of a march. By the way, it's a strange similarities in some ways, but it came out of a march at which he spoke, which he called to have a speech, and then a march afterward that turned bad. It's almost familiar to similar to some other recent experiences.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, but but the America's mayor, I always objected to that. I said, I remember when I lived in New York when he was the mayor. Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You hear people saying,
he also,
what happened to Giuliani? Nothing happened to Giuliani. This is Giuliani.
Oh my, this is who he is. I'm like, what are y'all talking
senile,
about?
but he was always petty and nasty. I think he might be more senile.
He's
But
not senile.
also, if you
Don't
drink
make
that
him
much,
crazy. He is just mean, honey. Some
he
people
can
are
be
mean.
both.
He can be both. But you
He
know what?
can
I'm
be
gonna,
both.
I'm gonna start
Yeah.
with him being mean. Now, I'm
This might be
tired
the
of
more salient feature.
Yeah.
Most mentally ill people are not dangerous or mean or anything like that. But self-medicated, mentally ill, mean person, that's not necessarily something that ages that well.
I'm not trying to give him.
But
I'm
yeah,
not giving him any space. I'm not giving him space. As a young man, he was mean. He's just mean.
Hair dye though.
Yeah. Well, all of that. He's mean.
And back in his height, if he booked a thing at the Four Seasons, it wouldn't have been a lawn mowing service, right? It would have been a hotel. There's some evidence of decline. Yeah. But yeah, sure. I mean,
oh yeah, Tom. Yeah.
Look, and the truth about Trump is Trump doesn't
remember when he moved his mistress into
a Gracie mansion.
Building into.
Look, his wife walked
while his
out of.
wife was there.
His wife walked out. Well, I don't know about that. I do know that she walked out of Gracie Mansion mad as she could be, interrupting again regularly scheduled programming.
He had the press secretary he was having an affair with announce and tell his wife that he wanted to divorce, which some would see as less than elegant, and was poorly received. By the wife and by some others. And look, that was already the second wife, right? Because the first wife really was his cousin.
Who he met at the family reunion, but I didn't know she was my cousin.
I mean, I think that part I used to say, I don't know if it's true he met her at the family reunion.
Oh, no.
But he was saying, I didn't know she was my cousin.
No, I bring receipts. Okay. That was published. That's reported. I don't.
But he grew up about He grew up about 7 blocks away from our house. So the idea that he didn't know they were related.
And they met at the family reunion, and he did not know she was a cousin. Yeah.
I met her dad, and my uncle's wedding. I don't know the backstory there, but obviously that seemed weird. I mean, look, I don't know. Maybe that was more common a long time ago, but yeah, I mean, definitely. There were a lot of people tend to forget his incredibly successful presidential campaign where he spent more money than anyone ever had to get the fewest votes ever. And he had that bizarre strategy where he was only going to focus on Florida, and then he came in like 4th there. I mean, there was some evidence that there was bloom off the rose. They also forget that he made a fortune after he stopped being the mayor because he was doing all that great consulting to make sure that Baghdad didn't become dangerous.
That's right.
I'm not sure that went that well either.
That's right. He's been given a lot of space. And, and I don't do Schadenfreude. Okay. I don't glory in anyone's downfall or difficulties. I don't. Sure. It's sad. The whole thing makes me sad. But I start looking at the straight line between America's mayor. I said, no. Who are you all talking to? I lived in New York, and I lived in New York under him. Yeah. I saw what he did to Dave Dinkins. I saw what he did. I just saw what he did. I know how he operates, and I don't like it.
People also forget that he made a living as an election.
He made a living as a terrorism consultant when September 11th to show that his knowledge of security was so abysmal. He's responsible for the deaths of most of the firefighters who died on September 11th. The fact that he put his bunker next door to the main terrorist target in New York City against the advice of everybody. And of course it burned down, when the towers were attacked. He has spent his career failing upward. And it is, as you say, Schadenfreude is a hell of a drug, but I have to say there's some satisfaction in seeing Giuliani revealed for what we knew he was all along.
Well, I want people to know. I would also, my religion makes me want him. I'm compelled to want him to change, to evolve.
Yeah.
And I'm not impugning anyone else's belief system. I'm just saying, I'm like, how do we get redeemed here? But I mean, Giuliani is who he has always been.
Yes.
And all these people are who they have always been. Stop.
For sure. I don't think these are out of character moments.
Yes. That's all I'm saying. These folks are who they have always been. I'm just saying, everybody, just be consistent. Start thinking. And start functioning not just in your self-interest, but in the common good. There's no way that a country that has 330 million people should have fewer than 1 million hospital beds. And you're going to dope me up so I'm just well enough not to be in the hospital. That's not working. No. Something is off here. People are sick. People don't have a way to actualize themselves. We're collapsing the public school system. The median rent in the United States is $2,000 a month. People can't afford that. What? No. You better focus. Focus.
And now we find out the only way to be upwardly mobile is to be blessed by being enslaved.
Oh my gosh. At least you'll get a skill. Well, they do that in the
army.
Yeah,
that's why
too.
we don't have enough. We don't have enough upward mobility now because of these libtards trying to block slavery. I don't know. It's terrible.
And AP African American history. America. Look, I don't have to worry about it. My Uncle Saint, may he rest in peace, said, "You know what? God will work it out without you having to lift a finger." Who would have thought we'd be finding thousands of indigenous children buried under Catholic schools? Oh, please. The blood of the righteous calls out. I'll keep on playing with this thing here if you want to. That they thought they'd be able to bury these kids and forget about them. Oh, no. They keep coming back. You better do right. See, I grew up with my grandmothers who died within the past 10 years. And they would always admonish us, particularly as we got older, be a good person. Do right. Do right by people. You better get right. You better get right, church. You better get right, Santita, Jesse, Johnny, Yusuf, Jackie. Get right. Be right. And I say that to everybody else. And I'm not saying I'm always right, because heaven knows I'm not. I am so far from being perfect. But I try to acknowledge when I'm wrong. And Lord, help me. Help clean out my heart so I can be the right kind of person.
Now, what will get you there fast is if you read The Art of the Deal.
Oh, my word.
That would really help.
But look, I look at all these people and I just want things to be right. I'm not going to hold you captive to your past. Okay. Because if I do that, then I got to deal with Biden and all of the awful things that he did by by jamming Anita Hill, giving me Clarence Thomas, voting to get a police officer's Bill of Rights just a couple of months after Rodney King had been beaten half to death. I can keep on going down the list on a whole lot of folks.
Yeah.
Where are we going to go from here? Have you learned from that, President Biden? Really? How are they going to ask you about Maui and you have no comment? You have no comment? There are 1,000 people who are missing right now. They were trying to move these poor and working class people off their lands. Now there's a perfect opportunity. And the only part of that island that was scorched while they didn't sound the alarms is that area. But not where the wealthy live. Y'all need to come up with something else because this ain't working. This is just wrong. And this is wrong. And you have people on the ground all over the internet trying to get the word out. He said the people they're coming to me, they're trying to buy my land because they know my insurance is not going to cover me reconstructing a house on this $1 million property. Come on, y'all. I mean, wickedness you ought to be sick of it because that's what this is. You don't turn on an alarm to let people know that there is an out of control fire. So all these people got burned up in their houses. And now you all want to tell me so I can get some more tears that these were children. These are human beings, young and old and everybody in between. Awful. You just ought to be tired of doing wrong. You just ought to be tired of it.
Yeah.
I mean, Jim, I'm sick of it. And I'm not giving these jokers any space on it.
No.
You roll up on some newspaper owner's home, someone who's providing a service to the community, and you kill his mother. That's what those police did. They killed this man's mother.
Yeah.
I don't care if she was 101 or if she was 1. You killed his mama. Shame on you. Shame on you. And you shouldn't just pay. You need to apologize. Because somebody talked about you? Because somebody revealed your record? Are you serious? Oh, Jim, Max, Dwight, Todd, no, You're not gonna tell my mama's 79. You're not gonna roll up on my parents' house and let that happen. I'm gonna make you pay for it. I promise you before God, I'm gonna make you pay. You would not be able to get a night's rest. Lord help me.
Hopefully we'll see Justice Stud.
Oh my gosh. This woman couldn't get to bed. She was so upset. Then she dies the next day?
Yeah.
No. Y'all got to come up with something else. This ain't right. And there's something called wickedness. Oh, Yvonne.
I'm going to sign off.
Oh, I'm sorry. What you say? Well, look, I'm giving all of you all my love. But boy, oh boy, we get right to it. And all my people are still here, and bless your hearts. But Alex, I want to thank you for a great show. Jim, I'm glad we got a chance to keep you today.
Reverend, it was great to talk to you.
Absolutely. Give Janine my love once again. Dwight McKee, love you. Love you, Jim. Love you, Reverend Dr. Todd Deary. Love you. Dr. Wolf?
Love you back. Gotta go. Gotta go play a lawyer on TV and get my popcorn.
And be a lawyer in real life. How about that? And pastor. You got 10 jobs. My God.
All that.
All that. Love y'all.
Take care.
God bless you, everybody. Have a great one.